Here's a question for you. How many photographs do you think you look at in a week? Hundreds? Maybe thousands. Instagram, YouTube, books, magazines, websites. We're literally surrounded by photography. But here's the problem. We look at thousands of photographs and we study almost none of them. We see a picture we like and we think, that's brilliant, or I love the light in that. And then 5 seconds later, we've moved on to the next one. But what if you stopped? What if instead of looking at 500 photographs, you picked just one, and then spent 10 minutes actually trying to understand why it works? Because one photograph that you can properly study can teach you more than 500 photographs you simply scroll straight past. So in this video, I'm going to give you 7 simple questions that will help you analyze almost any photograph. And if you can stick around, I'll give you one extra question at the end, and that one might just actually teach you more about your own photography than the photograph you're actually studying now. Before we start, analysis isn't criticism. So first, let's clear something up. When I say analyze a photograph, I'm not talking about looking for things that are wrong with it. This isn't the highlights blown out, or that should have been cropped differently. The horizon's half a degree out. And we're definitely not sitting here thinking, well, I would have done it differently. Well, at least not yet. But if you do want more help with feedback and analysing photographs, this will be of interest. If you'd like a safe space to continue your photography journey with like-minded people, then why not come and join us in our Photography Foundations community over on School. It's a really safe and friendly place to be. No ads, no algorithms, and no traditional social media nonsense. Just photographers from all around the world who are learning, practicing, sharing and supporting each other. We have an active forum where members post their images, ask questions and share ideas. There's a classroom with structured learning and feedback sessions, a members map so you can see who's near you, and regular challenges and discussions to keep your photography moving forward. So if that sounds like your sort of thing, the link is in the description, or you can use the QR code on the screen, and we'd love to see you there. So today we're trying to do something much more useful than just working out if there's anything wrong or off with a picture. Instead, we're trying to understand the decisions that made the photograph work. So you're not trying to judge the photographer, you're trying to understand the photographer. And there's an important difference in that. You're basically reverse engineering the photograph, as in, why did my eye go there? Why does the light feel like that? Why does this composition work? Why did they shoot from that particular spot? And why that moment? And the really important part is that you don't have to know the right answer. In fact, sometimes there isn't the right answer. You just have to be curious. So pick one photograph you really love from a photographer whose work you really admire, and let's walk through those questions together. Don't analyze anything yet. Just look at the photograph. Where did your eye go first? A face? A bright highlight? A splash of color? A shape? A gesture? A dark shadow maybe? And don't overthink this bit. Trust your reaction, because your first reaction is basically data. Now ask the more important question. Why did my eye go there? Was it the brightest part of the photograph? The area with the most contrast? Was it sharper than everything else around it? Was it a particular color? Was it a human face? Or was it simply where the photographer placed it? Now we're beginning to understand how the photographer is controlling our attention. And there's a really useful lesson here. What the photograph is about and where your eye goes aren't always the same thing. Imagine an environmental portrait. The person is clearly the subject, but there's a bright window in the background and your eye keeps getting pulled towards it. That tells you something. The subject is what the photograph is about. Attention is where your eye actually goes. And when those two things support each other, photographs often feel very clear and intentional. So don't just ask, what did I notice first? Ask, why did I notice it? Now I want you to do something that sounds really simple. Finish this sentence. This photograph is about, and try to do it in one sentence, not a paragraph. For example, this photograph is about a man waiting alone for the bus. Or this photograph is about the relationship between a child and a grandfather. Or maybe this photograph is about light falling across a quiet landscape. You get the gist. But whatever it is, what do you think the photograph is actually about? And don't worry whether that's what the photographer intended, because you may never know. What matters is what you're seeing, and if you can't sum it up quickly, that doesn't necessarily mean it's a bad photograph. Because it might be deliberately ambiguous, it might be complex, or it might be asking questions rather than answering them. But this exercise forces you to think beyond "I like it." Because let's face it, "I like it" doesn't really tell us much. It's a bit like eating a fantastic meal and saying, "That was nice." There's nothing wrong with that as such, but it doesn't tell you why it was nice. Was it the flavour, the texture, the ingredients, the way it was cooked? And photography is pretty much the same. "I like it" is just a reaction. But "I like it because" that's where the learning starts. And that's exactly what we're trying to do here. Now we get to light. And this is where I want you to go further than simply identifying it. Of course, we should be asking, where's the light coming from? Is it hard or soft? Is it front light, side light, backlight? Is it natural, artificial, or perhaps a mixture of both? But don't stop there. Also ask yourself, what's the light doing for the photograph? Because light isn't just decoration, light is direction. It tells us where to look. It reveals some things and hides others, as in light and shadows. Maybe the light is revealing texture in somebody's face. Maybe it's separating them from the background. Maybe it's creating mystery. Perhaps it's making the photograph feel soft and gentle. Or maybe hard shadows are giving the image an energy and a drama. So don't just learn to name light, learn to ask what the light is doing. Because that's when you start connecting light with intention. Does that make sense? So this is where I want you to stop staring at the subject and look at everything else, particularly the edges. Scan the whole photograph, top, bottom, left, right, and then look into all the corners. What has the photographer included? But equally importantly, what might they have left out? Are there objects entering the frame? Are there lines taking your eye somewhere? Is it empty space or negative space? Is the frame balanced? Or does it feel deliberately unbalanced? How close is the subject to the edge? What would happen if the photographer had moved a little to the left or the right, presuming they were able to do so without disappearing over a cliff or something? Anyway, this is where composition becomes really interesting, because composition isn't always about simply putting something on a third. Composition is a series of decisions, not rules. In fact, there are no rules. And sometimes the edges of a photograph can teach you more about those decisions than the actual center. So now ask yourself, why this exact moment? If there's a person in the photograph, what just happened? What's happening right now? And what might happen next? Look at the gesture, the expression, the position of the hands, the direction of the eyes, the relationship between people. Could the photographer have taken a picture half a second earlier? Of course they could. Half a second later? Absolutely. But they chose this very moment. Why? And this doesn't only apply to street photography or portraiture. A landscape has a moment too. The sun breaks through the clouds. The wind moves through the grass. Fog lifts from a valley. And that's why it's worth revisiting the same location at different times of year or different times of day. Even still life has a moment because of the way the light is falling across it. Photography freezes time, which I'm sure you know. So when you study a photograph, don't just study what was photographed, study when it was photographed. Now let's look at color, or if it's black and white, tonal values. If it's color, which colors dominate? Are they harmonious? Are they contrasting? Is there one small splash of color that your eye keeps returning to? Is the color cool or is it warm? Is it subdued or saturated? And then try to see what that color is doing to the way the photograph feels. If it's black and white, where are the brightest areas? Where are the darkest areas? Where's the strongest contrast? And where does your eye go because of it? Because photographers can quietly steer your eye through a picture using nothing more than brightness, darkness and color. And once you start seeing that, you'll begin seeing it everywhere. Now we get to the part that turns all this analysis into applying it to your own photography. Ask yourself, what do I want to borrow from this photograph? And I said borrow, not copy. That's really important. Maybe you love the side light, the negative space, the low viewpoint, the color contrast, or the way the environment is being included within a portrait. It could be the simplicity, the timing, the use of shadow. So pick one principle that really resonates with you, and just one, not 21. Because the temptation is to finish this exercise and think, right then, I need side light, a low angle, negative space, complementary colors, a 35mm lens, and somebody walking through the background. You've just created another form of overwhelm. So choose one thing and then go out and practice that one thing. And not by recreating their photograph, but by applying the principle to your own subjects, your own locations, and your own photography. And that's the difference between copying somebody's style and learning from their craft. Now there's one more great question you could ask, and I think this one is about your personal tastes and your preferences. Look at the photograph again and ask, what would I have done differently? And not how could I make it better? That's not the point. The question is, if you'd been standing there, what would you have naturally done? Would you have moved closer? Maybe would you have stepped back? Would you use more depth of field or a shallower depth of field? Would you have waited for a different expression? Would you have included more of the environment? Maybe use a lower viewpoint. Perhaps you'd have photographed it in black and white. And there is no right answer. But your answer starts revealing something really interesting, your taste. Because the things you would change, the things you're drawn towards, and the things you choose to emphasize start telling you what matters to you most as a photographer. So studying somebody else's photography isn't only teaching you about their photography, it can actually teach you about your own. And your answer to that one question might tell you as much about your photography as the other 7 questions tell you about theirs. Hopefully all that makes sense. So here's a challenge for you based on these questions. And this is not about another collection exercise. You don't need to save 500 photographs or another Pinterest board. And you don't need hours and hours of Instagram scrolling. All you need is one photograph. One photograph from a photographer you really admire, and give it 10 minutes. Ask, what hits me first? What's this photograph about? What's the light doing? How has the frame been controlled? What's the moment? What's the color or the tonal story? What do I want to borrow? And finally, what would I have done differently? Then choose the single most useful lesson you've learned from that photograph. Go out with your camera and practice that. We could call this one photo, one lesson, because that's how study starts turning an actual skill into improving your craft. The goal of studying great photographers isn't to learn how to take photographs exactly like them. It's to understand why their photographs work, so you can then take those principles into your own photography. And that's why I think we sometimes need to consume less photography, do less scrolling, and study more of it by curating the images you really like. Because you don't develop your eye simply by looking at more and more photographs. You develop it by learning to see more in the photographs that really resonate with you. And if you do that regularly, you'll start noticing light differently. Composition will start to make more sense. You'll see color differently. And eventually, you'll start making different decisions when you're out taking your own pictures. And that's the whole point of this exercise. Not to become better at analyzing photographs, but using that analytic skill to become better at making them. So don't forget to check out our Photography Foundation community. If you're still here, I think you'd love it. And if you've got something from this, give it a like, subscribe if you haven't already. It really does help the channel. Thanks so much for watching. Take care. I'll see you in the next one.